Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have our very good friend, Ray Bailey, here joining us. Ray, go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners out there.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Ray Bailey. I have been a coach for about 6 years now, 6.5, 7 years now. I know Dennis and Neil from actually their very first certification. I was there at the beginning. So it's been some years, man.
Yeah, it's been 5 years now.
5 years, huh?
Yeah.
Crazy. And your specialty, like Neil and I say, you are the strongest person we've had the privilege of ever personally knowing. Not seeing, but actually personally knowing. When people say, I know somebody's strong, we're like, do you really? I don't know if you really do. I don't really know if you really do. It's kind of funny. Like the other day, just a couple days ago, somebody posted some of their friends deadlifting because we've had the lockdown, and the post was, strong as fuck, right? And so these people are doing their deadlifting, and I was like, no, not impressed. Not impressed at all. And I shared it with Neil. I screen recorded, shared it with Neil, and I was like, this is what Ray has done to us. He's completely spoiled it for everyone else. Where we would have been impressed before, now we're just all like, no, doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, when you walk by and Ray's doing 600 pounds for reps with no belt, you're like, all right, that's different.
Okay, and just for context purposes here, people, just a few minutes ago before we started recording this, what did you tell us you did the other day and you were quote unquote weak? What weight were you doing?
500 pounds for a 5x5.
And that's weak, folks. All right. So that kind of gives you some context as to what Ray considers weak. All right. So give us a little background as far as your journey on your strength training perspective and things that you've done throughout your training career as far as getting up to these weights.
So for me, like my fascination with strength actually started when I was about 14. So my uncle was massive. And this is granted after he got out of serving time, but the first strong human I've seen in person. So to give you context, he was benching 405 pounds for 10 sets of 10, which is
that's fucking crazy,
ridiculous.
Wait a minute, reps of 10?
For 10 by 10.
Oh, shit.
How much did he weigh?
At that time, he was about 275.
Okay, still.
Wow.
About 275, I want to say. And he was lean, man. So I was like, what the hell? Like, how do I get that strong? Like, I'm struggling with like 130. No, I was like doing around 185 or something like that.
At 14?
At 14?
At 14.
Whatever, dude.
Yeah, whatever. At 14, dude. You were 14. Most 14-year-olds are struggling with the bar. Like they're all like, oh, as they're bench pressing it. And you're like, dude, it's just a bar. Oh, they're like, spot me, quick.
But like that was my first introduction to like somebody strong. You know what I'm saying? To seeing it in person. So that right off the back fascinated me. So when I was a freshman in high school, I was benching 225. I got looks from the football coach and was like, hey man, like you want to play football? I'm like, I'm good. I'm cool. So going on from there, like, I kind of dabbled in strength training here and there in high school, typical stuff, pyramid sets and cleans and all the other stuff, but it wasn't really all that serious. And that didn't really start until I was actually out of high school, funny enough. And so my perspective on strength at that time was just do as much as you can, as often as you can. And I didn't know anything about recovery or any of that stuff. None of that stuff really mattered because I didn't know any better. And so it transitioned into actually starting training. Again, I still had that same mentality that most people have when they first get into it. Is like, let's just bench press, let's squat, let's deadlift, let's do this, let's do that, let's do all these crazy things without any real programming or direction of where I was going. And so the more I started to read, the more I started to learn, the more I started to talk to people who had different knowledge bases than I did, the more I learned about programming and this concept of like different types of stimulus and how different types of stimulus create certain types of effects. And so my philosophy for training changed a lot, actually, since I very first started. With me, in my personal opinion, strength is universal. You know what I mean? Strength kind of carries over into everything, but it's still very much a skill that people need to learn. Like, you don't just wake up and like, all right, I'm strong. It doesn't happen that way. You have to practice it. You have to keep refining things and keep getting better with things in order to actually progress. So over the years, I was able to get strong. Granted, I had injuries, but at the same time, every time I got injured, my approach to it changed, actually. So in a way, it kind of helped progress me forward as I went along.
Did you ever get any advice, like secret advice from your uncle? I mean, he was so strong that, I mean, he had to have some sort of path to get there. You know, you don't bench 405 for 10 sets of 10, just messing around.
You know what, man? My uncle was always freakishly strong.
Okay.
Like stupid. Like, and that's kind of like everybody in my family's pretty strong. Like, I wasn't top 5 strong people in my family until I was like 20.
Oh, damn.
21. I shit you not. There was one day I was at home and my cousin came over and Matt Malacca was actually at my house.
Okay.
And my cousin came in, I think I had like 315 on the bar or something like that. He comes in cold, presses it for 10, gets up and walks away. I'm not even kidding. And so Matt's sitting there like, what the fuck just happened? And I'm like, hey, that's the family. Everybody in my family is pretty strong. And I guess I was naturally relatively strong, you know. My uncle, like, that's just how he was. Like, I've literally seen him pick another human being up and throw him 10 feet. Wow. In person. It's so shocking to see how strong he is. So I was like, all right, like, I don't know how I'm going to get there, because his advice was go lift. That was it. That was the only advice. Go lift.
Just go lift.
Go do whatever. Initially getting into it, that's actually exactly what I did. I just kept lifting.
Well, that consistency is huge, right? Just being able to go in there on a daily basis or every other day and stick with it is a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's been the most helpful thing. And I think that's something that's always kind of like been there for me, is I've always been consistent in one way or another. And it doesn't matter what it is. Even if I got 30 minutes, I could squeeze in a real quick session. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't really need 2 hours to work out. And I don't really think anybody needs 2 hours to work out. Can you get a lot done? Absolutely. But is that what you need? No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, it's kind of like efficiency. If you're spending 2 hours in the gym, what are you doing for that 2 hours?
Yeah.
Because if you're training effectively enough, you shouldn't even come close to needing 2 hours, right?
Right.
I mean, you're probably in that 2 hours. If somebody says, I'm at the gym for 2 hours, there's probably a lot of downtime. If you actually watched them, right? There's probably a lot of lag, a lot of downtime. So you're like, yeah, you technically spend 2 hours, but the amount of work that you actually put in is very minimal during that 2 hour period. As opposed to if you have a half hour, you're getting right to it. I mean, there's no wasting time. You're like, I got 30 minutes. Let's get right into it. So it's that efficiency and that effectiveness of the time, the usage of your time right there.
Big time. And like, when it comes to scheduling and like making sure that I'm efficient with my time, like that's more helpful. Like, that's another helpful step, right? Is how can you become not only more efficient in your movements, but how can you become more efficient with your time to make sure you get in whatever you need to get in, and then worry about the other stuff later on. What's crazy to me is, like, I hear about people warming up for an exercise for like 40 minutes. I'm sorry, what?
That's
like,
crazy.
That's a long time to warm up. Like, I feel like a warm-up shouldn't take any longer than 10 minutes. 15 minutes max. If you're going for like a max effort kind of day, then absolutely. Yeah, take your time. But about 7 to 10 minutes should suffice if you're really trying to get really warmed up.
Well, like, you've done powerlifting meets, and how long does it typically take a person to warm up before they go, perform in a meet?
I would say if someone's taking their time, maybe 10 minutes. And that's just my perspective when I did it, because it took me about roughly 8 minutes. You don't need that much rest in between to warm up, because you're effectively priming. So since you're priming a movement, that's really, really, really quick. But when you start to get up to priming the nervous system, that's where it takes a little bit more time. So then it might take, maybe 15 minutes if you're talking about priming the nervous system. But if you're talking about priming the movement, that doesn't take that long. It's just what positions are you getting in and how are you doing it?
Yeah. So for people that are just going in to lift, they're not going in for meat, spending 40 minutes to warm up is ridiculous.
It seems excessive.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. And I think, well, we know most people's perceptions or concepts of warm up is inefficient, so to speak, right? But we see a lot of trainers that'll tell their clients, oh, go run on the treadmill for 10 minutes and that's your warm up. And you're like, no, that's much more than a warm up. If you do the joint mobilizations that we teach with the stick, like that's a warm up, right? I mean, you're doing everything that you need to do to prepare your body for the movements that you're about to encounter, right? So you're making sure that all the joints are understanding their function, and you're adding the stress. So you're adding stress to the tissues and the joints, which John talks about. That's warm up. Anything that adds extra stimulus and stress, increases the stress to your tissues and your joints, is a warm-up. It stimulates the central nervous system and it gets the tissues prepared.
Yeah. And if a 10-minute run is really easy for you, okay. Yeah. But if a 10-minute run wears you out, then that's not a warm-up.
No, and we see most people if they're done running at the end of 10 minutes, they're like beat.
Yeah.
Now their coach is getting that. Now the trainer's getting them into the hard part of the workout, right? Which you're like, oh crap! Now they're already fatigued already, so they're going into the workout at 60% efficiency or optimal results there, right? That's what we're looking at.
Which is concerning because for my clients, I never want them to. They should never be fatigued coming into the workout. If I tell them to warm up, they shouldn't be like tired and huffing and puffing like ever. They did a little bit of a workout right there. So that doesn't make any sense from an efficiency standpoint, and that actually drops their performance. So if I want to increase their performance, it has to be something where it's just like, okay, how can we create the most ideal way to warm up in the shortest period of time? Which is why I like the stick so much, is because if I'm doing a squat workout, I'm picking 2, maybe 3 drills. That's it. And it's only what I need for that day. Because some days are different, Some days my adductors might be a little bit tired than the other. Okay, then I pick a specific drill to mobilize and warm up those tissues to prep me for squats. That's it. It's 2 or 3 drills. It doesn't take that long.
For us, personally, I love the fact that you've seen the importance of recovery and the ability to move and taking that to a higher priority, much higher priority than I did at your age. At your age, I was like, mobility, what the hell's that shit? Is that in the dictionary? I got to go look up that word. What does that mean? I think what's interesting is people in the demographic of powerlifting and really strength training, they kind of think their vision of mobility work is they think it needs to be exclusive, like they can't be mixed together. And I think that's the one thing of being able to have you at the forefront to show, look, you can be super butt-ass strong and still take a high level of priority in the quality of your movement and the quality of your recovery work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without taking away from strength.
Right.
And I think there's that misconception, right? You often see that. I've seen that at powerlifting gyms. And so when I was prepping for the meet, I was doing mobility drills. And that's the thing. I think there's a difference between active mobility versus that flexibility and just rolling. I don't think rolling is mobility at all, in my opinion. That's soft tissue work, and that's a different kind of category. But when I would do mobility work, people would come up like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of warming up my tissues and just kind of going about things like this. And they're like, oh, well, can you teach me? I'm like, yeah, sure, I can teach you some things. And then I go on to teach them. And then later they're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I was like, why'd you ask? And it's because there's this thing of, why am I going to do this if this is going to potentially take away from my strength? And that's completely backwards, actually, because the tighter you get, at a certain point, you kind of lose strength, because then it's like, what happens with injuries? And then what happens when things aren't functioning the way that they're supposed to? So the only reason that I actually got stronger, as strong as I am currently, or retained a certain amount of strength that I actually have, is because I'm actually doing mobility work. It's not simply from the weight training or resistance training.
And that's a great thing, and that's awesome to see, because like we said, there are too many people. And I actually encountered this when we were at a strength and conditioning show with high-level coaches, where these are collegiate strength and conditioning coaches. And one of the coaches there, who was from a very prestigious university that's got a top 10 football program every year, he was looking at our booth, and I said, here, let me hand you a stick and let me show you some thoracic drills. Your players are going to need this. And he literally looked at me and said, I like my back the way it is, and just lumbered off. And I was like, oh my God, I was really surprised. That was the last comment that I would have ever expected to get from that type of coach at that level. Your players need mobility and strength out on the field of play. So if you as a coach have this massive barrier to mobility work, you're easily passing that philosophy on to your players.
Oh yeah, big time. I've gotten to talk to, even when I was in college, like when I was talking to a strength and conditioning coach at one point, it was interesting because now looking back on the training philosophy, like the philosophy then was just like, going to hammer in strength. It's going to hammer these like exercise, and it's going to keep pounding and pounding and pounding at it. But then it's just like people are getting hurt. Like, why are people like blowing out their ACL, or why are people like tearing their hamstring, and all these different things? Is because there's that lack of attention to movement, or basically the lack of attention to detail, if you will, because that's a part of it. Having that mobility is a form of strength in itself, but people don't see it that way. And I think that's where that problem is.
What would your recommendation be because we see a lot of high school athletes, and maybe even as young as middle school, but high school athletes predominantly, that are being pushed to lift a lot of weight. I mean, what would your approach be if, let's say, if you had a son or a daughter who was getting into high school athletics, and their coach is like, we're going to really thrash on the weights. I mean, I want you lifting heavy. What would your philosophy or your recommendation be if that was the case?
If that was the case for me, I would have them set aside time to actually focus on movement and mobility, learning how to actually move their body, how a human should be able to move. If I get an athlete that can't simply do let's say a lunge, simple exercise, can't do a lunge without a good structural stability, a good foundation, I don't think it's a good idea to load up a barbell on their back and tell them to do squats until they fail. That seems kind of backwards to me. And so for me, it's a thing of let's teach you how to move first. Then we can start to add that load over time so you can get stronger as you control the movement. And so having that practicality, or setting aside, 2 to 3 times a week, I want you to focus on these particular drills or these particular exercises to get you to learn how to move better. Then when you go into the weight training, it's like you're ready, you can handle it, it's good to go. But that has to be a part of the programming.
Yeah, and I think in good programs, you'll see, movement patterns in their warm-ups, and they're doing this every single day so that, over the course of the year, that movement quality keeps improving and improving.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, right away, man, if someone's lifting and they're getting worse, then it's like, all right, well, we should probably stop this or slow it down a little bit and change things.
But do we think the vetting process at that level, as far as picking a coach, is where it needs to be? Because we do see some high school programs that are essentially picking really coaches or trainers, sometimes just people that are strong. And they're like, oh, you lift a lot of weight, come teach these kids how to lift weight. I think we have to ask ourselves as a parent, if your kid is in that high school, is the vetting process the proper thing? Is this a trainer that I would want to have coaching my kids? Right. So I think that's part of something we want to kind of look at as a parent, if you had a kid going into a high school sports program, for sure. Right.
Because for me, like, if that's my kid, I want to make sure my kid's taken care of in all facets. Yeah, I want to make my kid strong, cool, do so. But again, make sure my kid can walk away. Like, that's the thing. I want to make sure my kid can walk away just fine, and they're not limping away. Or they got to like, I got this recurring shoulder injury. If that's the case, then that means that there's something wrong fundamentally with how they're being coached, and that approach has to change. So there should be a process where maybe they're looking at like, okay, well, your strength and conditioning coach, that's good, but what else can you add to it to make this a little bit better?
Now, do you primarily work with just barbells and dumbbells, or are you using other tools besides like sandbags or kettlebells in your training?
I use pretty much anything else. Pretty much everything. Like, I'll use mace bells or I'll use Indian clubs. I like barbells and I like dumbbells. I enjoy them, but they're not the only thing I do. Because the way I see it is like I want to be kind of well-rounded. At this point, I feel like, not that I've mastered barbells or anything like that, but I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it, in a sense that I don't really particularly need to practice a whole lot. And so I add in other things that I may not be that coordinated at, right? So like with mace bells, that requires some coordination. It requires some stability. It requires different type of movement patterns. And so I'll do that every once in a while. Sometimes I'll do that once a month or twice a month or whatever the case is, or whenever I feel like it. If I'm like, I don't really feel like doing a whole lot of barbell work, just going to go pick up a mace bell and swing that a couple hundred times or whatever the case is. But I don't like being put in one box, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
The way I see it is like strength has to be well-rounded. The other week, I just did carries. I did a lot of carries. Like that was pretty much the majority of my workout.
What kind of carries were you doing? Was it farmer carries or just everything?
It was farmer's carries. It was with 40 kilo kettlebells.
Okay.
Each hand. I just kept just carrying it. Just picked it up, carried it for about 60 yards, did an exercise, came back, carried it for another 60 yards. And I just kept doing that over and over and over again, but because I wanted that to be my primary movement for the workout. I think there has to be some versatility.
And what I like about your strength is the fact that it's not just strength with a barbell or a dumbbell. Because like years ago when you picked me up, like it was like absolutely nothing. I mean, and I was 180 at the time. And Ray picked me up. Ray picked me up like I pick up a piece of paper. Like I was in the air before I even knew what the hell was going on. I'm like, what is going on? And he's all like, flip. But when you watch the video, it's so freaking casual, and that is what's amazing. So, and what's amazing is the fact that a lot of people that just work primarily with barbells and dumbbells, they have a tough time working with other versions of load, right?
Yes.
The mass is different, the volume is different, and if they don't practice with different types of mass and volume, they have a hard time manipulating those type of objects. And with you, it was just, here's a human body. This is not equally balanced, but it was still just and up and over.
Have you done a lot of wrestling in the past?
I did wrestling a little bit in high school, but I actually ended up not competing in wrestling.
Okay.
But my uncle did, funny enough, after he got out of prison, because he was a martial artist. And so I learned some jiu-jitsu and wrestling from him. But also, I used to wrestle my cousins a lot too, and all of them are a lot bigger than me. I kid you not, I didn't hit a growth spurt until I hit high school. When I was in junior high, my 8th grade year, I was like 4'11" and like 130 pounds. I wish I could make that up. At the end of my freshman year, I was about 5'8", about 160, 180 pounds. So I was small, man. My cousins were big. I was like, dude, like this sucks. Like I had to wrestle them all the time, and we were just fighting. It was basically me versus them three.
I think that's where you built all that super strength
from. Yeah. It was just the body.
Because there's so many different angles, and you're dealing with, guys that are just way, way stronger than you. And I think that's why you're able to pick up anything, because you know how to manipulate load at all these weird angles, and you just understand like how to leverage your body, where to tense up. Where some people that just lift weights, they can't tap into that.
And I think that's where that versatility comes in, right? Because I've seen people who can row a good amount of weight, but they're terrible at pull-ups, which is surprising. Because I'm just like, when I used to see it, I was like, why aren't they good at pull-ups? Like they're rowing like 200 plus pounds, but their pull-ups are not really all that good. Understanding now, it's just a different load. It's just not the same. Before I even really got into weight training, I was doing a lot of pull-ups and a lot of push-ups and a lot of stuff like that. So I built strength in that regard, and that kind of carried over into the weight training.
And that's the thing is, when you wrestle, your object that you're wrestling is fighting back.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's something that people that only use dumbbells and machines never get acclimated or adjusted to. That's the massive part of stimulus that they're missing. And then when they do encounter that, it's foreign to them. They don't know how to react to that, because that barbell, yes, gravity's fighting you, but the object's not fighting you. The object's not moving around in your hand. And that's the one thing that people that do wrestling and MMA, that is a massive advantage, of strength advantage that they have over a lot of other people that just work out in a gym.
Absolutely. And I got a lot of that strength from football too. Cause like when I was in football, I was a linebacker. I'm hitting anybody that gets in front of me. And a lot of those times I'm trying to work off people who are blocking or whatever the case is. Realistically, if people want to get strong, go against people. Honestly, and I don't mean that in a way where it's like violent or anything, but you get stronger and you get more efficient and you get more well-rounded when you go against other people. Like, there's a reason why wrestlers are so damn strong. It's because they're constantly wrestling people who are effectively changing their shapes and changing the way that they're loaded. And they have to try to overcome that in some way, shape, or form, either through technique or through strength. And regardless, at some point, that strength starts to go up.
And I think if you have an aversion to, and some people do, I mean, we know that some people have an aversion, and not just because of what's going on currently with the COVID, but even before that, some people have an aversion of, engaging with other humans physically. So if you have that issue, a physio ball or a Swiss ball works great if you're pushing it into a wall and driving into it or pulling it in against it, because that energy that you're putting into the physio ball or the Swiss ball is giving right back to you. So it is a great substitute if you don't have a partner, or if you have that aversion to having contact with other people, which we do see.
Or like some of the stick wrestling drills too.
Yeah, the stick wrestling drills. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. So that actually was the hardest. So when you guys had us do the physio ball against the wall and we had to try to stabilize, that was the hardest. I think that was actually the hardest drill for me when we did that in level 2. And it's because there's that reciprocation, right? It's like you were just talking about. People will get better at learning how to kind of keep themselves grounded actually by doing those things. Because oftentimes when I get my clients to do it, they're like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" I'm like, just calm down. Like try to find that point and try to focus on controlling it. And typically they tend to get pretty good at it after a little while.
Let's kind of switch gears here. Let's delve a little bit into the nutrition side. That's not something we really get into anymore. As far as
not
nutrition.
too much.
But for maintaining that strength and maintaining the size, is there just some general guidelines that you try to maintain?
So for me, one thing I always look at is protein consumption. There's a lot of information that tells people like, oh, I should have 1 gram of protein per kilo, or 0.8 grams of protein per kilo, or whatever the case is. I think the amount of protein that somebody needs to ingest is going to be specifically driven by their activity and what type of activity they're doing. For me, I look at how much protein am I getting in a day. And so typically about 250 grams of protein per day is a good like bar for me. But that's because I'm doing a pretty relatively significant amount of resistance training. So when it comes to that, I always look at protein. That's what I tell everybody to look at, because most people chronically undereat protein, which is fascinating, because people are like, oh, well, I'm not getting any stronger. Oh, I'm not really getting any bigger. I'm like, well, okay, let's look at what you're eating. And then it's like, yeah, you're not having enough protein. 1 egg isn't going to give you a good amount of protein. Having 4 ounces of steak in the evening isn't going to give you enough protein. There has to be that constant flow. And so nutritionally, I look at what's going to be best balanced for that person. So for myself, I don't tend to eat a lot of carbs, at least during the week. Weekends are, they're different. But I love my pancakes, man. But but for me, I focus on what's going to be the most efficient source of protein, what's going to be most efficient way for me to get in effectively the energy and the nutrients that I need to keep it going. So I try to focus on making sure that what I am eating is good stuff, but also making sure I'm getting enough of it. Because when I start to undereat, I actually start to get fat, which is surprising.
Oh.
Yeah. So I find that, and I've tested this out quite a few times actually. I've done a lot of testing with different nutrition. And what I find is if I'm under eating my calories to a relatively significant degree, that I look like I'm losing muscle and I start getting puffy. What I found is that typically when it happens, my protein consumption is a lot lower. And so actually when I up my protein, that satiation is there, but also I'm able to retain that lean body mass a little bit more too. So I can kind of manipulate the fats and the carbs however I need to.
So I remember before the shelter in place started, you were messing around with the carnivore diet. How did that go? Or are you still doing it?
I'm still doing it. So it's interesting, man, because when I first heard about it, I had that initial resistance that a lot of people have. Like that's bullshit. There's no way.
Okay. Well, so what is the carnivore diet in case anybody wants to know what specifically it is?
So the carnivore diet is when you're only eating specifically animal products. Depending on who you talk to, it's going to be different things. So it can be like red meat. You can do chicken and pork and stuff like that. But typically red meat is going to be the most nutrient dense and most viable available. Some people like, again, with the carnivore code, he does a nose to tail. So he eats everything from nose to tail, like organs and everything. Mm-hmm. I didn't follow along those lines. Typically, a lot of my eating made up of top sirloin, ribeye, eggs. I would eat cheese, sometimes yogurt, but not really all that often because it's just, I feel like I'm better off without it. I just kind of stuck to that. And actually it worked very well for me personally. I wasn't really all that hungry. I still stick to intermittent fasting as well, which is another thing that most people think is contradicting to strength training. I do pretty well with intermittent fasting. Some days I do 1 meal a day. Some days I do 2 meals a day. It all varies. But what I'll do is I'll do carnivore a few days a week or most of the week. And there may be 1 or 2 days where I incorporate some kind of vegetables or whatever the case is. And I'll have my whatever day.
Wow, fascinating. So how many days a week are you intermittent fasting?
Actually, I do 7 days a week. Even more so on the weekends, I actually go longer periods of time without eating because I don't do anything energetically demanding. And so I try to keep my food consumption to what specific things am I doing for that day. If I'm not working out, I don't need to eat a ridiculously huge meal.
Okay.
But my eating window is 4 to 6 hours or so. And I can allocate all my calories in those 4 to 6 hours.
Is that mostly in the evening?
Typically, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest breakfast person, honestly.
Yeah.
So
What about the pancakes, man?
So except on the weekends. Well, on the weekends.
Actually, on
dinner.
So pancakes don't have to come in breakfast.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, we talked about
don't
this.
Don't be labeling that. Pancakes ain't just for breakfast anymore.
No, they're not. Come on, man. Got to go with the program. But no, like I typically tend to eat like around like 4, I'd say.
Okay.
So around 3 to 4, and I typically stop eating like around 8, 9, sometimes 10, depending on how much I need to eat.
And it's fascinating that you say you intermittent fast. You see your strength levels are still there because I think a lot of people do consider that to be contradictory. That if they did intermittent fast, that they would lose a lot of their strength. So it is nice to see somebody like yourself that is an example of what you can still do with the results of intermittent fasting still being there.
Yeah, like, and I think what happens too is when people do start to intermittent fast, if they are losing strength, there's typically a couple factors. Maybe the stimulus that they're getting isn't enough stimulus. That's going to cause their strength to drop. Or maybe they're getting too much stimulus. That's going to cause their strength to drop. If they're not eating enough, especially enough protein, that's going to cause their strength to drop. So there's a few different factors to look at that may contribute to why their strength is dropping, not just, I'm allocating all my calories to 8 hours.
So then the person has to try to play around with different aspects. They've got to try to basically be their own scientist, so to speak, or detective. They've got to, if they start to see that decline in strength, then they need to play with different aspects for a certain period of time to figure out if this is the piece that I need to change versus just assuming it doesn't work, which I think a lot of people do, right? They go, well, I'm intermittent fasting. My strength is going down. This is bullshit. I'm not using it anymore. As opposed to taking time to figure out, okay, is there a certain factor that maybe detrimental and taking away from my strength, and then trying to figure out what that is while they're still doing the intermittent fasting.
Yeah, because people like to blame one thing, and it's just like first thing that comes to mind, like, oh, it's the fasting. It's definitely that. Everybody's fasting window is going to be different, right? Some people can do very well with a 14-hour fasting window, and they do exceptionally well. They have good body composition changes. They have good health changes and health benefits that come out of that. Some people might need to fast a little bit longer. It's going to depend on the person, but it's up to them to go, all right, I need to experiment with this a little bit and see what happens.
So what about your blood work? I think we talked about this a little bit too, but you got blood work done before you did the carnivore diet and then during?
So I actually did keto. That was that was what I did. So I did keto a couple years back, and I was strict on it. And I did the whole the strips thing and all the other stuff. And I went to go get my blood work done, but my triglycerides were high. And so my cholesterol was high. And at that time, everything else came back normal, except my white blood cell count. But that's just because that's an ethnic thing, actually. And so I was like tripping. I was kind of wondering for a second. I'm like, why is my triglycerides and cholesterol high? So I actually had to go do more research. And then when I looked at what is the normal for people who do ketogenic type of eating, and what they actually find is that their triglycerides and their cholesterol tends to be high. However, the units of measurement for that in a typical blood panel aren't really all that good, because there's different types of cholesterol, and the balance of what that is makes all the difference. But my fasting glucose levels were normal. I think it was around 60. Oh. My fasting insulin was low. Like everything was normal. And so when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, I feel good. I feel really good. But the fact of seeing like my triglycerides and cholesterol was high, I was like, should I be concerned? But that's the other part, is that people aren't really taught exactly what cholesterol is. Cholesterol is actually just a vehicle to effectively move fatty acids. And so what happens is when you actually take in more fast, there is going to be an increase in cholesterol. But cholesterol can change within an hour. If somebody's fasting, of course, their cholesterol is going to be a little bit higher, because there's effectively a stress on the body and it reacts to that. But they're not really told that by their doctors. And so when I got my blood work done, then it was good. And then I went back again about 6 months later, and I actually lowered my fats a little bit, and the numbers came back good. I didn't really feel as if it was really any different per se, in a sense that it hindered anything or manipulated anything or how I felt. So I think when it comes to like that blood work and getting that done, there should be a more in-depth panel when people do get it done. And I always suggest to my clients, I'm like, hey, if you want to see how relatively healthy you are, go get a full panel, not a basic panel, but go get like a full metabolic panel, go get your A1C, go get all the blood work done to kind of see where you're at, so you can make the changes where need be.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I don't know, Dennis and I don't really delve into the nutrition as much, because it's so individual.
And as an industry, we see, why is there so much arguing about how people should eat? It's really as frustrating as a coach, because it's like everybody is different, and yet we've got people just beating each other up over this is the way everybody should eat. No, it's not. You know, you talked about ethnicity differences in regards to white blood cell count, right? We have a lot of genetic differences right out of the gate that nutrition really impacts. And what we eat or don't eat goes a long way to determining our overall health. But to tell somebody that, yes, this system of eating is universal, well, I don't know, man. It's hard to say that. And and over the years of researching all these different formats, you're like, you just scratch your head. You're like, I don't know, man. I think it's just it's individualized to each person. And that's kind of what I think what we all tell our clients is,
go get a blood test, go right? Check your food sensitivities, all that, and go from there. But we kind of just lay off that, like, hey, look, pick quality foods. Yeah. Don't go too crazy, Yeah. Eat 2 to 3 meals a day, and
which is a good. I think that's a good measurement tool, right? It's like, obviously step away from crap and processed stuff as much as you can. it's not really all that hard, but I think where people get in trouble is that like they try to with the whole like this is the only way of eating. This is the only way you should be eating. I think that's complete bullshit. I'm not gonna lie to you, man, because like I don't believe that carnivore is the best diet on the planet. I don't believe that at all. I believe it's a good habit of eating. Just like I believe keto is a good habit of eating, or being a vegetarian, or maybe even vegan. If that's something that you need for your specific genetic makeup and whatever, if that's what you need, do it. If that makes you feel good, do it. But to say that like there's only one way of eating, that's like saying there's only one way of working out. It's like, come on,
there is
man.
only one way. Our way.
There's only one.
It's like the Highlander of nutrition. There can be only one. That was my terrible Scottish accent. I am Irish, by the way, so I have a terrible Scottish accent. For me, laying off of meat's a big deal. But we talked a couple months ago. I went like a week period with I didn't eat any meat.
Yeah.
And I felt good, but that was more of a choice. And then I went, no, I need meat. Like I was like, okay, I did this for a week. I felt good. And then I went back to eat meat. Like it was just not something it's not something me personally would maintain for a long period of time. But I think you play around with it just to see what it feels like.
Everybody should. And I think there's not enough people that are doing that, where it's just like, let me cut out certain things for a week or 2 weeks and let's see how I feel. But the other side of that too is like when people feel good from cutting out certain foods, maybe is it because the food had a bad reaction with your stomach and your digestional system? Maybe taking that food out kind of cleared up some stuff that you had going on, or whatever the case is. Like I'll see that with people who are vegetarian, who go vegetarian or vegan, right? Like, oh yeah, I feel really good. Yeah, but you also cut out some crap too. So which one is it? Is it because you're eating vegetables mostly, or is it because you cut out crap? And that's the thing, is like what people pair their food with makes a difference too.
What do you mean by that?
So, let's say someone were to go vegan, right? Let's say this person actually ate meat. And they're like, hey, I'm going to try out going vegan for a couple weeks. If you ate meat, but you ate it in a burrito, come on. Obviously, that's not good. But if you're like, I'm going vegan and I feel much better. Okay, are you feeling better because you're eating more vegetables, or because you cut out junk that you were eating with the meat that you were having before? Or if you're like, oh yeah, well, I cut out chicken, but I had it fried. What the fuck? Come on, man. Like you can't sit here and be like, oh yeah, well, meat's bad, but how you had it was what's bad. What you paired it with is what's bad. It's kind of hard to say what's better, what's worse, because it's individual, but also like looking how people had it is a really big thing to look at, because they like to only highlight little bits and pieces, but they don't go, oh yeah, well, how I had it was this whole thing.
Yeah, because now you're like, okay, you had it and you deep fried it in vegetable oil. Now maybe it's the deep fried vegetable oil that's causing all these problems,
Right?
Yeah.
Do you think we should also look at maybe our ancestral roots in regards to what types of foods we should be eating also? Because if we think about fruits, if we're from equatorial areas where it's really hot year round and it gets super hot and humid, especially during the summertime, fruit would be something that you would readily eat to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
But if your ancestral roots come from, say, Northern Europe, where it gets pretty freaking cold and your growing season is very limited, and there's a ton of fruits and vegetables that you would have never had access to, that your body just really didn't evolve to consume, so to speak. And maybe that's another aspect that maybe some people should look at, perhaps. Just
absolutely. Because I think even what is that? It got really popular some years ago when people would actually eat for their blood type, right? There's that, because maybe there's certain pathogens and different things that are a little bit more effective for people eating certain types of protein or whatever the case is. But people also need to know how to eat in season too. And so most people, when they eat vegetables and fruits out of season, that can actually be inflammatory, because now you have these manipulated affected particles within these vegetables and fruit that don't really agree with the system. And since they're out of season, they're effectively force grown. And so what's interesting is I've been reading the carnivore code a little bit. And one thing he kind of highlights is when it comes to certain fruits and vegetables, like not all fruits and vegetables are going to be good because everybody's stomach and system is going to be different. And so knowing how to eat within season is going to be extremely important because it has to actually do one itself. There was a researcher who said like 99.9% of pesticides actually come from fruits and vegetables themselves, not from a straight on food, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I was like, that's fascinating. That's something to think about. But if that's the case, then should we limit? Yeah, we should limit certain types. Absolutely.
And I think it's tough because you go to the grocery store, right? You have the same stuff available mostly year round, right? So unless you're going to the farmer's market all the time, or you're growing your own, produce and vegetables and fruits, then it's hard to know what is really in season or not, unless you actually go do the research.
Yeah, people should be buying from local farmers to begin with, in my opinion. Like, that's going to be the best way to go, because exactly like you said, you know what's in season when it is in season. Otherwise, they're going to be like, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't got, apples just like at this time. They won't be grown for another 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
That agriculture has to actually develop and grow on its own, and then it can actually kind of start to go that way. So people need to learn. I think people would be better off learning a little bit more about that.
It's cyclical. It's seasonal. It's kind of like when eating 6 meals a day. It's things are cyclical. Means your digestive system needs a break. It needs rest. It wasn't meant to be working 24 hours a day. It's like any other system in your body. It needs a rest. There needs to be a time where there's no food in the digestive tract, so that way the digestive tract has some time to just take a break. So I don't know if you ever ate that way, but I know when I used to eat my 6 to 7 small meals a day, man, I got past that 3-hour window, you did not want to be around me. I'll tell you that, dude. You did not want to be around me, man. Sherry will tell you. She'll tell you. She'll be like, "Oh yeah, you did not want to be around Dennis because he was all like, I need food." I mean, and it's not cool.
Hanger, huh?
I had massive hanger issues, and it's just not like you get to the point where you're like, I can't live like this. Like this isn't normal. Like, how can this be considered normal?
But also, I think that's one of the things that kind of creates that not an addiction to food, but a severe dependence on it. It's crazy how often I hear people like, "Oh, I had a snack. I got to have another snack in 2 hours." I'm like, what? Like, how are you hungry again? Did you not eat until you're satisfied? No, I don't do that. Yeah, I got to have 5 or 6 or 7 small meals a day. I'm like, that's a lot. That's a lot of stress. Because that's what it is. It's effectively stress. And so like that chronic stress that's being introduced to the body, well, your body's going to have to find some way to fight that off. So how does it do it? Inflammation. That's just how the body's going to react to it. So I think people will be better off learning, for one, how to get away from food. Like, someone doesn't need to eat every 3 hours, 4 hours. People can go 5 to 6, 7, 8, 9 hours without eating. Like, I think we were talking about this a little while ago. Dennis, you were like, when people will go on flights and the flight's like 8 hours or 10 hours, they're just like, oh, I got to eat.
Yeah.
You go 8 to 10 hours without eating?
Right.
Which is shocking, but that's just still kind of where we live in.
I think some of that is mental too, right? Because if you're really busy doing an activity, you don't get hungry.
Yeah.
Right? You just, like when we're teaching, right? When we're teaching a course, you go 8 hours, and if we didn't have lunch, it'd be okay because you're in it and you're mentally focused. But I think when you have this downtime, I don't know, there's something that happens.
You get into a flow state, and food is the last thing on your mind. Like, you're in it. Like, you are mentally just in tune to what you're doing. And that flow state is phenomenal when you get into it. Time just stops. It's irrelevant. And yeah, food is the farthest thing from your mind. And it's always interesting when you break for lunch, and then the people that are attending the course, you tell them where, especially if it's here in San Jose, you tell them, oh, there's some restaurants here and there. And they're like, oh, where are you going? No, I'm not eating lunch. And they're like surprised. Oh, you're not going to eat? No, I'm good. Like, are you sure? Like, and they're kind of genuinely concerned for your well-being. Like, are you going to die? No, I'm good. Nothing's bad's going to happen. Like, I'm good with this.
Like, when I've taken the certifications, I didn't eat during lunch most times. I didn't eat until I got home that night.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't need food. I'm not, it's not a ball and chain kind of relationship.
I'll tell you the one thing that the one time when I was intermittent fasting, I was going on 48 hours and I played hockey. I got back home and it was
a big intermission there.
It was a 1 a.m. Yeah, it was a 1 a.m. game. So of course, get home. It's almost 3 a.m. and you can't go to sleep. So I'm sitting there watching TV, trying to down regulate. Food was the last thing on my mind until the freaking food commercials came on. I mean, really, and I'm sitting there going, son of a bitch. Now my brain saw the visions of food and it correlated, what that food would taste like and blah, blah, blah. And that was really the only time I literally had to go, okay. And I was on live TV. So I'm like, okay, I got to go watch something that's not going to have commercials in it.
You didn't get up and go to the drive-thru?
Yeah, no. I'm really, and what was crazy was up until that point, like I was good. Like I was well into my 30 plus hours.
Okay.
And so by that time, I had already acclimated myself to not having, I didn't get those urges. But then when I saw the commercials, and of course, when they show one food commercial, they got to back that up with a second food commercial right afterwards. So it's that back-to-back hammer. So it does show you that marketing and that visual aspect of the influence of how easily we are influenced with what we see and what we hear in regards to seeing things, and we correlate what it tastes like, what it's going to smell like, and all of a sudden, that the brain goes, oh, I need that. And so,
that or even smells.
Oh, smells for sure, right?
That triggered, like, I remember I did a 50-hour fast, actually.
Okay.
I got a whiff of somebody ate something like right before, like, I got into contact with them. It was actually it was at work. I was like, oh, you had this for lunch, huh? They were like, what the? How do you know? Like, oh God, like I can smell. Was it good? They're like, yeah, it was really good. I'm like, that sense of smell is crazy, because when I first did a prolonged fast, that was the first time I actually got like a significant increase in like my smelling symptoms. I was like, why can I smell things I don't typically smell?
You started going into like the hunt mode.
Man,
he turned into like Wolverine with the heightened senses. He's like standing downwind. You're like, I smell somebody like 10 miles away. He's like a polar bear. And I smell that. Okay, so you said you did a 50-hour fast. The most I've gone is 53 hours. How long? And for people listening to this is not. I mean, we don't just do this haphazardly. I mean, for me, it was a very gradual buildup of being 24 hours. And then the next time I went on a prolonged fast, I added just a couple hours. Is that a process you went through before you hit your 50 hours?
Absolutely. If I didn't do any kind of, I guess, prep beforehand or any kind of like practice beforehand, I wouldn't have made it. But I kind of did like what you did, started 24 hours. After I felt pretty good with that, I added another 4. Felt pretty good with that. So I just kept gradually adding hours until I felt like pretty confident enough where I was like, I was actually going to do it. The funny thing is about doing that prolonged fast is that I got hungry, but the hunger went away relatively quick. And so, like, granted, I was busy too, so that kept my mind off of it as well. But people often mistake thirst for hunger. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I can actually say from my personal experience is I drank a lot of water because I was mostly thirsty. But it actually helps with that hunger. Or salt water, actually, to be more specific.
Oh, very true. Yes. Yeah. Now, when you do filtered water, then are you adding, like for me, I add a pinch of Celtic sea salt in my water, especially in filtered water.
Yeah, I'll do those trace minerals.
Yeah, trace minerals. So
I'll do Redmond real salt in my water typically. And so, funny enough, James D. Nicolantonio wrote the book The Salt Fix, and that was a really good book. But he talks about Redmond real salt and the fact that it actually doesn't have any microplastics in it because it's taken from a lake bed up north. The salt actually tastes it's actually good too. But I would typically do that because it does have a little bit more magnesium than most salt does. whereas pink Himalayan salt has more iodine in it. And so, so typically for me, I'll do maybe a quarter of a teaspoon in 32 ounces or so, then just kind of have that. Okay. And that for me works really well.
And so for people that are trying to figure out what we're talking about, when you have filtered water, and when you look, let's say you go to the store, you pick up a bottle of filtered water, when you look on the back, if it's pure filtered, like Coke owns how many different brands of bottled water? They own a ton. But when you pick up their bottled water, you'll see that it's fortified with minerals once the filtration process has taken place, because they pulled those trace minerals out originally during the filtration process. Where companies like Evian and Fiji, when you look at the back of their bottles, you'll see particles per milliliter. Mm-hmm. And that's telling you how many trace minerals there are in there. And the trace minerals need to be in there to help increase your rate of absorption into the cells. And that's the reason. So when we're talking about adding salt, we're not talking about your regular table salt. So we're talking about sea salt, or it's not filtered, it hasn't been cleaned, and it's still got those trace elements, because we're adding that to the filtered water. So that way the rate of absorption increases into the cells. And so for people that want to understand what we're talking about, that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. And that there has to be that balance too. So that's the other side of the equation, right? Is we hear about sodium a lot, but there has to be that balance of potassium and magnesium. And so in order for water to actually get into the cell and have that extracellular and intracellular water balance, there has to be potassium and magnesium present in the system as well, trace minerals. So when people actually have that, they have a much better absorption of that water, and their hydration gets a lot better anyway.
And it's fun.
They're hydrated.
Exactly. Yeah. They're way underhydrated. And if you're a frequent traveler, especially if you're on planes all the time, it is really important to make sure that you're staying hydrated. It's probably one of the easiest things, just in general population, to be dehydrated. But when you travel a lot and you spend a lot of time in the sky, you need to really focus more on making sure that you are hydrated. Like one of the first things I do when I get to my hotel is I make sure I have water on me. But man, when I get to the hotel, I'm searching out more water. And that's one of my first objectives. Besides moving, I want to get hydrated.
So going back to strength training here and these little 30-minute workouts. So for someone that only has 30 minutes every time that they can train, let's just say 2 or 3 lifts or 3 movements would you recommend to get the most bang for your buck, and get as strong as you can?
Right off the bat, first thing that comes to mind is deadlifts. Without a doubt, or some kind of deadlift variation, to be specific. It doesn't have to be a barbell. It can be a hex bar, it can be a kettlebell, doesn't matter. But some kind of a deadlift variation. That is just overall best bang for your buck exercise, especially if you're trying to get the nervous system stimulated. Also, carries of some sort, any kind of carry. Farmer's carry, front rack carry, overhead carry, doesn't really matter. Anything that you can kind of get in for that regard. And if I'm looking for another best bang for your buck, it kind of really depends, to be honest, because I feel like if you're trying to get something where it's more lower body dominant, goblet squats are a really good way to kind of get some of that stimulus, because it does force a lot of stabilization in the core, stabilization in the hips and the ankles. Probably one of the best and easiest forms of squats to do, in my opinion. I would add that in, but if they're looking for something to kind of get a little bit more out of it, especially for like some kind of a back movement, either some kind of row or pull up, if they have the ability to. Typically dumbbell rows, actually.
Dumbbell rows over pull-ups?
I say pull-ups over dumbbell rows for sure, just because it's more, I feel like you get a lot more out of that. And you can't cheat it.
Yeah, you
can't cheat a pull-up.
No.
I mean, technically you can, I guess, but strict pull-ups, absolutely, big time. But if someone can't do pull-ups, dumbbell rows are like a really solid go-to.
And an advantage with goblet squats, which Ray just mentioned, is it really, for people with back issues or chronic back issues, they really are much safer as far as the version of a squat is concerned, because Mike Boyle talks about a bar on a back is a torque amplifier, especially if you don't have very good core strength, vertical core strength, as you're going up and down out of the squat. That bar may create rotation and then create more torque in the lumbar spine. So if you don't know what a goblet squat is, you can YouTube the shit out of it. You'll see more people showing you goblet squats, but it is a really safe version for the general population, especially if you tend to have chronic back issues.
Yeah, and then that counterweight just helps you get a little bit lower, helps you work your mobility a little bit more too. So speaking about, pressurizing your core and everything, so you don't use a belt to lift. Have you ever tried just to test, like, hey, my belted deadlift is over 700, or my unbelted deadlift is 700 or a little over 700. What could I do with a belt?
Come on, 900.
So I've used a belt one time, and funny enough, it was actually off cover for that powerlifting competition, and I just wanted to see how it felt.
Okay.
And I did a low bar squat, and it was 600 pounds, and that was the most I've done at that point in time. So when I did that, it was hell uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie. I hate belts. I hate belts with a fiery passion. I just can't get comfortable with them. Like, it never feels good. For me, I'm curious, but I'm not curious enough to actually do it.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, to me, a belt should be used as a tool to learn how to brace, in my opinion. Right. So I've actually seen, this was years ago, I forgot the gentleman's name, but he would actually use belts as a way to teach people how to actually properly brace. And he would actually get them to, expand their rib cage, get everything to push against the belt, and then just kind of lock everything in. And they would do that in an exercise, which I thought was really fascinating. But I think when people use belts, they actually get weaker. And I mean that if you were to take a belt away, how strong would they be?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we Neil and I say that Ray is the strongest person we've ever had the pleasure of actually knowing, because of that simple difference. And it is super impressive when you see somebody lift that much weight with no belt on. It is ultra impressive, and that's what we call stupid strong. It really is. And so when you take away that belt, now how much can you actually lift, unaided lift, so to speak?
Yeah, it's kind of like lifting with knee wraps. Like, it's cool. You can use it as a way to maybe gauge your stretch reflex or whatever the case is, but it's just a tool. And I think people depend on it far too much. And so actually, when I did my lifting competition, people were surprised. Like, you don't use a belt? No, I don't.
Yeah, they definitely had one shocked. Yeah, they were probably very surprised. Yeah. And
it was, for one, it was never comfortable. For two, I didn't really care to actually practice lifting with it. But it's just, I never saw a point in me doing it. If I can be strong without a belt, then I can be strong, is the way I saw it.
And you can be strong in any situation that arises. Absolutely. Because, if something happens, you can't go, oh shit, hold on a second. Let me get that belt. Got this thing. All right, let's do it.
True. I used to see that so often. Like, people are like, oh, I can't do this without my belt. I'm like, damn, what is it? You're like your left leg or something? Like, what's up, man? Like, it's so fascinating how dependent people are on it. Not that it's bad, because maybe some people need it. Maybe some people need to learn how to use it or learn how to create that proper intra-abdominal pressure. But still, they have to be, autonomous of it. They have to know how to lift without it and be strong without it.
So what you're saying is I shouldn't have a belt on when I'm doing seated leg extensions.
Definitely have a belt. Definitely not.
Okay, just want to make that clear. I mean, I'll make sure I don't do that next time.
But do you think though that you could be, used in the proper way, that you do gain some strength from the belt, like across the board for most people?
Yes, I believe there actually is. So I think there's that is a pretty significant benefit to it, because some people can add on anywhere between 15 to about 30 pounds to their lift.
That's a lot.
The belt.
Yeah.
Which plays a pretty significant part, which is interesting because, like, if you've ever seen some powerlifters, when they program or when they do some program, they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this part without a belt. That's crazy. You have to actually add in beltless training to your training. Mm-hmm. But it's so they can actually get stronger, have a baseline, so when they add on a belt, that carries over. So I think having that baseline strength is important. Does it add to it? Absolutely. When used properly, yes, big time.
And so for general population, you definitely want to try to just use the belt to teach them how to brace, and then take it away from them. So that way, once they've learned that bracing technique on their lifts, take the belts away and then train them without it, because that now they should have that feedback. They should understand how to do it naturally. So then going forward, then you're saying that they should be able to do all their lifts without their belt.
Absolutely. The Valsalva maneuver, right? It's been pretty popular for quite some time now. When most people don't know how to do it, right? Like they don't really have that awareness, that kinesthetic awareness to go like, okay, if I need to like lock down my rib cage, okay, now I need to breathe through and expand my rib cage 360. That's one of the things that I've learned when I took FMS years back from Greg Cook, is that learn how to breathe better, like learn how to breathe properly so that you can be more efficient with your movements. And so most people don't know how to breathe. So then there's that weakness from that lack of that diaphragmatic breathing. So when people are taught how to brace and learn how to contract and expand their diaphragm, they actually get stronger pretty quickly, because that takes care of a lot of that stability. That stability is not as much of an issue at that point anymore.
So do you think a logical progression could be someone starts out with a belt that's fairly tight, right? So you start pushing against that and then slowly loosen the belt and keep the belt on until it's really loose, and then take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best one. It's that feedback. It's like the sticks, right? The sticks allow for the user to get that immediate feedback as soon as they get into a certain position or as soon as they add in a little bit of tension. A belt is very much the same way in that sense, where people can get that immediate feedback and they can go, oh, okay, I get it now. And then they can just keep practicing and practicing and practicing.
And the whole purpose of this is so that way it can transfer into your everyday life. Because just like Neil said just a few minutes ago, when you're out in the middle, let's say you're moving furniture or doing something in your house, you don't just stop and go run and get your belt, put it on, and then come back and do what you're going to do in the house. It's just ridiculous. You don't do that. So, but you've got to be able to at least teach yourself the basics, so that way when you go to have to move your furniture, just pick up your kid. You should be strong enough and understand and those reactions should automatically happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not something you should have to think about. And that's ultimately what we're after. We want you to automatically be able to do those things without even thinking about it. It's just a natural reaction. Are you looking to set any PRs in the near future? Or are you looking to...
Oh, man. I'm not going to lie, man. This lockdown got me messed up. I would like to, but it's just going to take me some time because, for one, I just didn't have the same stimulus for quite some time. But I would like to get my squat to 650 by next year. By the middle of next year, say a year from now. That's the next goal. I would like to get my deadlift to like 725.
And what is your squat right now?
Jesus, right now?
or when you last tested it?
When I last tested it, shoot, it was 600. It was 600 on the high bar.
Okay.
I don't low bar anymore. It's just not all that comfortable for me. It never was. But 605 on the high bar. It was 605. Squats is definitely one exercise I feel like I can move the bar in relatively quick versus my deadlift and my bench press. Bench press for me is the slowest moving one.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
It took me when I did 475 about a year and a half ago. It took 4 months of programming for me to get there. And at that point in time, that was like a 20-pound jump. And that programming and I was benching 3 times a week doing that.
Oh, damn. Okay.
That frequency was there. But I haven't done a programming since then, actually.
See, that's when it's advantageous to have short, tiny little arms. Just saying. These short, stubby little arms right here.
Yeah, his hand shows in the camera, dude.
Yeah, like right here, like, yeah. See,
my elbow.
Yeah, see that? I mean, that's ridiculous. But that's where I have a limb length advantage. I got a lever length advantage there. So
dude, you'd be a monster bench presser.
Yeah, I hit 400 years back, and then
Damn, dude.
and that was in my right around 30, 31 years of age when I did that.
At what weight were you? How much did you weigh?
Oh Jesus, I weighed 170.
Okay, that's pretty.
Damn.
Good.
That was
That's
170.
hella good, man.
I used to have a trainer that I used to work with, Corey, who is now a chiropractor. Honestly, before you, he was the strongest individual I had ever known.
Oh, damn.
On our list. Like he was him and Jeff, who owns Bad Boys Bail Bonds. The two of them were the two strongest individuals I had ever seen. But Corey isn't the size, like Jeff is a big man. He's big, like huge barrel chest. This Jeff's thighs are like just ridiculous, like ridiculously large. And so, but like when you see him, you expect him to be strong. Like he has that physique. Like it doesn't surprise you when he picks up a 150-pound dumbbell and curls with it. You're like, okay, I expected that, but Corey was still big, but smaller compared to Jeff. And, and yeah, him and I would tear it up in the weight room. He was probably one of my best lifting partners that I ever had when I was doing that meathead lifestyle. The two of us would go in and he would crank it. So he was super great motivationally for me. And, but yeah, I got to the 400-pound mark and it was great. But then I sat there and went, okay, now what? Like I literally was all like, all that shit for what? Like I did it and I was like, okay.
It is wildly underwhelming.
It is, isn't it? Huh?
Crazy. Because when I got there, I was like, cool. What's next? Like, like it's funny because I don't really like bench press per se.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't really look for, I'm like, I'm about to go bench press. I'm not one of those kind of people. I'm just like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, it's a pretty decent movement, I guess. But like, I've never really been all super satisfied with bench press. I get way more satisfaction out of squats or deadlifts because I feel like that's much more impressive. It's almost like I could bench press 600 pounds. That's a lot of weight. Don't get me wrong. That's a shit ton of weight. But if someone's like, oh yeah, I just squatted like 700 for like 3, I'm like, oh shit. What? Like that is my reaction.
Yeah.
So it's just bench press for me personally is just super underwhelming.
Yeah, it was. I was just all like, well, and now like maybe once every 3 months, I lay under a bar and do some bench press, and that's about it. I actually, for the first time in quite a while, a few months back, right during this COVID when it started in March, I actually benched, I think 4 times in a period of like 2 weeks.
Oh, you're probably so sore the first couple of times.
Yeah. And honestly, I only did that because I just, for whatever reason, I was like, fuck it. I want to try it. Yeah. I'm going to do this a couple times a week for 2 weeks and see what happens. And see, but that was it. Other than that, I don't really do much when it comes to that. Because with what you said with the squatting is knowing that how much physical demand you're under when you have that much weight on top of you and you're standing vertically, like that's the kind of weight when you step back from the hooks, like you're like your whole body is just
lit up.
Like that's a totally different sensation. You just don't get that when you bench. Like it's just not even close.
Not even close.
Yeah.
That's one thing I respect about people, like people who can like squat like a significant amount of weight. Like it's just like, damn, like it's not like, and especially when they're doing for repetitions. Like I'm impressed by somebody doing a 315-pound squat for a set of 3. I find that personally impressive. It's just like, damn, it's a lot of weight on your back, and you're sitting down and standing back up with that thing more than once. Shit, props to you. Or like a deadlift. Like you pick up something hella heavy off the floor and stand up with. To me, that's impressive. But to go, I laid on my back and I pick something up and I press it off my chest. that doesn't sound that exciting. So it's like, good for you.
Yeah, it's like a bent over row is more impressive than a bench press. A heavy bent over row for sure.
Yeah,
I'm much more impressed by that. If you're doing bent over rows, with 200 plus pounds, that's beastly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think especially if you're general population, because I mean, think about how much we talk about weight strength in the weight room, but then we think about really when you think about over the last year outside of the weight room, how many times have you really picked up anything that's over 100 pounds, 150 pounds?
Hardly ever.
Hardly ever.
I think we've talked about this before, Ray, about how, most of us that are in this field are probably way stronger than we actually need to be for our daily lives.
Yeah. Like, there's no reason. Like, when are you ever going to pick up 300 pounds off the floor? You're probably not. You're typically not. Or you're going to put something on your back or hold something like this that's 150 pounds of squat with it. Probably not ever. Are we too strong for what we really need for our day-to-day? I mean, technically, yeah.
but there's nothing wrong with that, man.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. No.
If you're staying healthy, I don't think you can be too strong.
No. Like, and that's the other major part, right? Is like, how can you get strong without getting hurt?
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the biggest things that is the key to getting strong. Is like, don't get hurt. If you don't get hurt, you can keep training and keep building that strength. But as soon as you get hurt, now that actually kind of cuts you back.
Well, and I like what you said about how you're going to try to hit 650, but you're not doing this until next summer, where I don't think people realize how long it takes. Unless you're a complete beginner, you'll get strong pretty fast. But if you've been lifting for quite a while, it takes a really long time to make changes.
It takes forever. Shit, even for me to get 10 to 15 pounds on my deadlift, that can take 6 months.
Well, yeah,
that can take 6 months.
People are impatient. People have they don't have patience. Like, they want it now. And it's our job as coaches is just letting them know that, dude, this is a journey.
Yeah.
Like, if you want this right and you want to stay healthy, like, this is going to take some time.
Yeah. And you want to stay strong for the long haul too. You don't want to hit this mark, and then all of a sudden you hit this mark and, you get severely injured, and then what? Because
if you can't get out of bed, it doesn't matter. Like, if your back gives out and you're bedridden for 3 days, you're laid up, what have you accomplished? You've actually set yourself way back. Because now, and then you get that same person that didn't have patience in the first place. Now they're coming back from an injury. Oh, God, now they're really impatient, right?
Yeah.
Because then they got somebody telling them, look, this is going to take you quite a while. And they didn't have that patience in the first place.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
Well, and I think everyone coming out of lockdown in the areas that, you're allowed to, they're going to hit the gym and they're going to go crazy for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And
it's like that.
They need to start this thing off slow, unless you have your own home gym and you've been able to be consistent and all that. That's different.
It's like that New Year's Eve resolution, but now it's not going to be New Year's Eve. It's going to be that COVID resolution, right?
Yeah.
It was really cool to see Cliff Marshall, who's the head S&C coach at Indiana for the men's basketball, and he shared a post the other day that said, "Hey, most injuries are going to come from trying to do too much too soon after doing too little for too long."
Yeah.
And what I liked about it was he said, "This is something that I personally have to keep in mind also." And that was great, and to see that post. And so I was like, this has to be shared. This has to be put out there because it's just a little reminder for people.
Yeah, because your motivation is going to outweigh your body's capability to adapt to it.
Yeah, if that was the case, man, a lot of people would be a lot stronger. But it's just like, I think that the thing that people miss too is that people don't enjoy the process enough. I think that's a huge missing component, is that people are only focused on, how do I get this 300-pound bench, or how do I get this blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, enjoy the damn process. It's not, you don't just get there in one go. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort, but there's that learning along the way, and people just kind of don't really care about it. And so for me, I enjoy the process of whatever. If I never got stronger, if I never got any bigger, if I never got whatever, I'd still do it. personally. I would still be lifting. It doesn't really matter. The end goal is just, that's the icing on the cake, but I enjoy the process of it all as a whole. And so people need to learn how to enjoy the process a little bit more so that they can get more out of it, and then look at it as, okay, like I got my goal, but look at all the work that it took to get there, rather than going, I just got my goal.
Okay, so here's a random question.
Yeah.
Have you ever been tempted with PEDs?
No, I've never been tempted, but I've been curious about them. Not curious enough to try. Like I've always been accused of taking them, actually, which I thought was, I don't know if that's an insult or a compliment.
I think it's both. No, I think it's both. I think it's both. You know.
But like, I was always accused of taking them. Like even in high school, they're like, "No, you're juicing. You're on gear." I'm like, "I'm not. What the fuck? I don't even know what." And I've been curious about it because I'm more so curious. How strong would I?
Right.
We're curious.
We're curious.
Don't do it though. Man. Don't do it.
Yeah. Like I've been curious about it, and I think about this sometimes. I'm like, damn, if I was running a stack, and if I was running like everything's been like down to the T, I know exactly what I'm taking. How strong would I get? And I think about that. I'm like, damn, would I get to like a 900-pound deadlift? Maybe. I don't know. Would I get to 800-pound squat? I don't know. Like, I'm curious about it, but I've never been tempted by it. You know what I'm saying? I've never been like, I've at no point ever someone have I ever seen somebody take it and been like, damn, I want to try that. I've never been like,
all the people around you that do take them aren't even as strong as you now.
Yeah.
That's the reason why.
which is kind of crazy because like I knew people who did take performance enhancers.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna sound like a dick, but like they're not all that impressive. Like it's just not, they're not all that impressive, and it makes me wonder, like, for one, what are you doing it for? Are you doing it?
Yeah.
Are you doing it just recreationally because you want to see how big you can get, or are you doing it for something specific like a sport or whatever? But most times people do them recreationally, and half the time they don't know what the hell they're doing either. It's typically not impressive when I see people take performance enhancers. But also the effects of it are permanent. And so that to me kind of wards me away from some of the side effects that come along with it.
Yeah, the risk is not worth the reward for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The reward is small. The reward is super small.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I can lift some stuff. That's kind of it. That's kind of it.
Yeah, I had that a long time ago. And I did. Growing up, looking at Muscle and Fitness and all these Flex magazine and thinking, Jesus, do I have what it takes to be on the cover someday? Besides the ugly face, do I have the ability to get the physique at least on the cover? You know, they can airbrush the face, but I'm thinking, I'm going, man, like, do I have it? And then when I came out here to California and worked with him, I was like, do you want to, can I ask you to train me for a show? And his first question was like, okay, well, what are you willing to take drug wise? And I'm like, I'm not willing to take anything. He's all like, well, then don't waste your time and don't waste my time. And I was like, okay, cool. I mean, that's all I needed to know, because same as you, I was tempted. I was like, man, what are the possibilities? Like, I carry this much muscle mass just at 5'3" naturally. Jesus, what could I do if I took if I took a correct stack for, let's say I did that for a year, what could I look like? So
right.
And it was hard for me, but yeah, at the same time, after he's talked to me a little bit more about it, I was like, yeah, it's not good. Yeah, it just didn't. The risk definitely outweighed the reward for me.
Because that reward is oftentimes too kind of short lived. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like you get to that point and you keep that for an extended period of time. It's pretty short lived. And so if I have to do this crazy hormonal damage to my body in order to get to this point, but then after it's just like, well, say goodbye. It's going to start to go away pretty damn quick now. Like, to me, it's like, no, like, I don't want that. I don't want to have to deal with that, because then I have to deal with the damages for much longer than I keep the reward.
Mm-hmm. Because if you look at it in the respect of, if I do this, if I get the reward here, but it comes with the fact that I'm taking X amount of years off my life expectancy, or I'm going to encounter X amount of health issues because of it, is that worth the outcome, or the 15 minutes of fame or whatever that you might get? Like us, we're not professional athletes. It's different if you're talking about tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah,
like
I think they all should be taking it, honestly. I don't really get that part of it, where it's just like you have these people who are doing a significant amount of bodily damage, but then you're going to get on them for taking something that helps them basically heal quicker and recover faster. Yeah. You're not damaging your body for money, let alone over and over and over and over and over again. If these people have careers that last 3 to 10 years, that's a long time. And so I see why athletes do that. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. That's literally their livelihood, and they got to take care of their body the best way that they can, and that helps. Mm-hmm. Like, getting to that level it's not easy, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot out of you.
And it's so, yeah, if there's a lot of money involved and it's your career on the line, then yeah, we get it. And it's kind of interesting. I think most people don't even give a shit if pro athletes are taking performance enhancers, if it really comes down to it. Mm-hmm. Because we watch sports. Why do we watch sports? We're trying to see.
You want to see the best, most athletic ever, strongest, most powerful,
right?
Movement person out there, right?
We do. I mean, that's why we pay. That's why we take the time to sit down in front of the TV and watch this.
Or you watch superhero movies,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, they are essentially our superheroes. The people that we see in sports, they are our superheroes. They're the ones that can do stuff that we can't. Do things that we can't. So, I mean, if the kind of like the hypocrisy, the double, of issue in the world of organized competitive sports is kind of goofy in some respects when we really get down to it, so yeah, interesting. I figured I'd just ask you, that's not something I'd ever asked you before. So I wanted to see what your feedback was on that, because I think a lot of people out there right now ask themselves that question a lot, because I was pretty surprised at how many, when you read articles about how many of the general population gym goers actually take PEDs.
Man,
it's quite a bit.
It's quite a bit.
It is a lot.
Like, I was really surprised.
Even at the gym I was working at, I knew of 20 people who were taking performance.
Oh shit! Did you really?
20 people. When I heard about it, I was like, really? Is that it's that? I was surprised. I'm like, it's a small spot, but it's just that many people.
Yeah.
Like a regular, and it's just a regular gym.
Yeah.
Like, it's not Gold's Gym or anything like that. It's just a regular
gym. Yeah. I was really blown away when you start to read articles about how many people, when they survey people without anonymously, have you ever taken blah, blah, blah. And the percentage is rather surprisingly high. People are like, aesthetically, I want to look a certain way, or I want to get a certain strength level. So for them, that reward has outweighed the risks, and they're willing to do it. And sometimes it does it. You scratch your head going, okay, like, what's the point of all this? You're not going to get paid. You're not even going to get paid 6 figures for taking, the
you're paying 6 figures.
You're paying 6 figures, right? Like, you're not going out on a stage. You're not going to get on the cover of a magazine. Like, this is stuff that's not going to happen. So yeah, it is. It's interesting to see what motivates people, and
which is crazy how much they spend too. Like that was surprising to me when I felt like, because I've read some stuff about how much they spend, and they spend a lot of money.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
a lot. I'm like, dude, even if they were to compete, you're basically paying that back. That's all that is. You're basically paying that back. So it's like, damn, I didn't realize.
You have to be like the top 1% of the elite to make money doing that, right?
Pretty much.
Like in that bodybuilding world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even in the lower, like, say, baseball, like, I mean, how many people, like, think about how many minor league affiliates. Every team has 3 minor league affiliates, right? And now we're not even taking into account the independent leagues that don't have actual affiliation with a parent club. Think about how many players are on each one of those teams, and think about how many players are taking PEDs. And then how many are actually going to see the big show? Like, how many are actually going to get a call up?
That's true.
You know, and they're not making bank down at those leagues, at those levels. They're not getting paid a ton of money. So yeah, it's like you said, they're paying to basically play in essence.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, don't get me wrong, you're getting paid to play a kid's game.
Yes.
Sign me up. If I had that ability, sign me up. But if you're paying out the wazoo to get PEDs, and then you never get that call up to the top level, you kind of got to sit there and think afterwards, shit, was it even worth it?
Yeah, that's always a big question. And I think that's, because I remember, Neil, like me, you were talking about football, right? I think the question came up like would I play football professionally? I said no. I think it's good that there's people who take care of these athletes, and like they have that team of people who are trying to make sure that they're as healthy as possible. But again, it kind of comes down to how much bodily damage are they taking in those sports. And in my opinion, football is like amongst the highest. And so if I got paid $10 million a play, I'd probably say no, because at that point in time, it's just, what's this going to do to me long-term wise? And not just the shoulders or the knees or the back or none of that, but like the brain, the neurological damage that comes along with that. And it's just kind of hard to say, because the way I look at it is, how's this going to improve my quality of life? Yeah,
I think, with all the research coming out with CTE and all that stuff, and you just don't know.
Let's say there's a young listener out there that's thinking about getting into, want to be super strong. They're trying to build up their strength. Is there any books that they should read, or any principles or guidelines, like say 3 guidelines or something that you would want to instill in that person?
For one, take your time. It's not, try to walk to the strength, don't run to it. Just take your time, you know what I mean? Like it's going to come, be patient as possible, and just kind of move forward from there. 2 is going to be learn as much as you possibly can, not just from the strength aspect, but from the movement aspect. You know, learn about your body, pay attention to your body. Like, it's important to kind of log how you feel after, doing a certain program or whatever the case is, and understand that not every program or every training program is going to be for you. Just, find what works best for you. And the 3, don't be hard-headed. Jesus, people who are first starting off are pretty damn hard-headed, and they think they know it all. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have been there. Hell, I've been there before. But there's things you're going to come across on that journey that's going to humble you and put you in your place, basically. And so start talking to people who know more than you, or know things that are just different from what you know, so you have a much more well-rounded understanding of how strength works. You want to give any social media handles in case anybody wants to jump on your accounts and check out what you're doing? Oh yeah, I'm at Ray Bailey Coaching on Instagram and on Facebook. I haven't posted in a little while, but I am on there. So I do try to post some useful content and kind of talk about a little bit about recovery and stuff like that. So yeah, tune in. And you can also catch Ray on our live stick mobility classes. So you've been doing the Saturday classes predominantly. So we thank you for that. Appreciate it, brother. And so you can catch him there. If you miss him on the live streams, we do transfer those over to YouTube. So our YouTube channel, Stick Mobility TV, you can catch his workouts there also, the 45-minute stick mobility workouts. So that's another place that you can catch Ray at also. So thanks for joining us, brother. We appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. And we look forward to having you back on very soon. I appreciate it, man. Thank you, guys.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
All right, man.
Peace.
Bye.